Tonight we stay up late with Captain Lawrence Coyne, whose routine flight home became one of the best documented military UFO encounters in American history. When 4 Army airmen reported a near collision with an unidentified object over Mansfield, Ohio, and a helicopter that climbed nearly 2,000 feet without anyone touching the controls. This is the High Strangeness Sleep Society. On the evening of October 18, 1973, 4 crewmen of a United States Army Reserve Medical Evacuation Unit were in Columbus, Ohio, for their annual flight physicals. They spent the evening being weighed and measured and pronounced fit. Every man aboard certified that night in writing as sound of body and mind. They left the medical facility around 10 o'clock, drove back to the airport, filed a flight plan and warmed up their aircraft, a Bell Iroquois, the workhorse everyone called the Huey, flying under the call sign Army 15444. Home was Cleveland Hopkins, up to the northeast. An hour of flying, a little more. They lifted off from Port Columbus at about 10:30. The night was on their side, clear, cool, a little over 40 degrees. The stars out, the wind light, visibility 15 miles or better. First Lieutenant Arrigo Jezzi took the controls for the trip home, and the helicopter settled onto its course at 2,500 feet and 90 knots. Below them, the farm country of central Ohio rolled past. Dark fields, the occasional yard light, small towns strung along the highways, most of them already turned in for the night. 4 healthy men, a familiar machine, a route they had flown before. The town of Mansfield lay ahead on the track, a little more than halfway home. On the night of October 18, 1973, near Mansfield, Ohio, the 4-man crew of Army Helicopter 15444, Captain Lawrence Coyne, First Lieutenant Arrigo Jezzi, Sergeant John Healy, and Specialist Robert Janasek, reported that a red light converged on their aircraft at 2,500 feet, that their radios went silent, that an unidentified gray object passed close overhead and lit the cockpit green, and that the helicopter climbed roughly 1,800 feet with the controls set for descent. All 4 signed the Army's report. Their separate accounts, retold and re-examined over many years, never came apart. It helps to know who was in those seats, because what the Army got that night was very nearly a panel of professional witnesses assembled by accident. Captain Lawrence Coyne, 36, in the front right seat, was the unit's commander, 19 years in the Army Reserve, rated in airplanes, helicopters, and seaplanes, and in civilian life a one-time plainclothes officer with the Cleveland Police. Sergeant John Healy, 35, the flight medic behind him, was a detective in the intelligence unit of that police department, a man whose working life consisted of deciding which stories held up. Specialist Robert Janasek, 23, the crew chief in the other rear seat, serviced computers for IBM and had crewed helicopters on active duty in Vietnam. He knew the sound and shape of aircraft at night the way a farmer knows weather. Jezzi, at the controls, was a chemical engineer, the newest man aboard. Skeptics would spend years probing this crew for the usual soft spots and find remarkably little to work with. Somewhere past the halfway point, around 11 o'clock, Healy noticed a single red light off to the west on his side of the aircraft. It was doing nothing worth reporting. Aircraft carry red lights, and the sky over Ohio has never lacked for aircraft. He watched it a moment and let it go and did not mention it to anyone. A few minutes later, Janasek picked up a red light of his own, on the opposite side, low on the eastern horizon. This one held steady. It seemed to pace the helicopter, keeping station off their right side, neither gaining nor falling behind. He watched it for perhaps a minute, turning over the ordinary possibilities: a radio tower beacon, a light aircraft running along the same airway. Then he keyed the intercom and told the captain. Coyne's reply was the reply of a man 20 minutes from home. "Keep an eye on it," he said. Janasek kept an eye on it. About 30 seconds later, he spoke again, and this time his voice had changed. The light was no longer pacing them. It had turned, and it was coming at them. Coyne took the controls from Jesse. He looked out the right window and saw the red light closing fast at their own altitude on what pilots call a collision course, which is a term of art that means exactly what it sounds like. His first thought was entirely reasonable: a military jet. Mansfield Airport lay only a few miles off, and the Ohio Air National Guard flew F-100 fighters out of it. A fighter moving that quickly would explain the speed. He reached for the radio to warn it off. Mansfield Tower answered his first call, an acknowledgement his call sign read back, and then the radio went quiet. Coyne tried again. Nothing. He switched from UHF to VHF and tried both frequencies. The equipment showed every sign of working. The channels simply carried no voices. 4 men in an aluminum machine over dark farmland, with a light rushing at them and nobody on the line. Coyne did what the emergency procedures said to do about converging traffic. He pushed the collective down and put the helicopter into a descent, 500 feet a minute at first, then steeper, until the vertical speed indicator showed 2,000 feet a minute, which in a Huey at night is not a maneuver. It is an escape. The altimeter unwound past 2,000 feet, toward 1,700, with the dark hills of Richland County somewhere below them at 1,100. And still the light came on. Janasek called it out as it grew. Coyne looked up from the instruments and made the calculation every pilot dreads, the one where the closing speed erases every option, and said out loud the sentence that ends the ordinary part of this story. "That's no F-100. The crew braced for the collision. The object did not hit them. By every account given afterward, it did something harder to file. It stopped. Whatever had crossed several miles of sky in a handful of seconds decelerated smoothly in almost no distance at all and hung above and ahead of the helicopter, filling the top of the windshield. Coyne, Healy, and Janasek all described the shape the light belonged to, and their descriptions agreed in the ways that matter. An elongated metallic body, gray, without wings, without rotors, 60 feet or so of it. A red light at the nose, a white light at the tail. And underneath, toward the rear, something like a lamp housing, from which a beam of green light swung slowly around and back and down, through the top of the windshield, through the tinted upper panels, and into the cockpit. For a moment, everything turned green. The instrument faces, the men's hands, the whole interior of the aircraft, nose to tail, lit the color of the deep end of a pool. Jesse, in the left seat with his view partly blocked by the cabin roof, saw less than the others, a bright white light above them, nothing more that he would swear to. It would have been tidier for everyone if all 4 men had told one story in one voice. They never did, and Jesse never adjusted his account to match his crewmates, and investigators came to regard that stubborn mismatch as one of the more convincing details in the file. 4 identical stories sound rehearsed. 3 men describing a craft and a 4th describing only a light sounds like 4 seats with 4 views. There was no heat from the beam, no sound from the object, no wake, no wash of air against the rotor, none of the physical company a machine that size keeps. It held there over them, the cockpit washed in that color, for a time none of them could later fix precisely. 10 seconds, perhaps. It was not the kind of interval anyone was timing. Then it moved off to the west, unhurried, and the crew began to breathe again, and Coyne glanced down at his instruments to recover the aircraft from its dive. The dive was gone. The altimeter read 3,500 feet, and it was climbing. Hold the arithmetic of that in mind for a moment. Coyne had last seen his altimeter at 1,700 feet, going down at 2,000 feet a minute, with the collective, the lever in a helicopter that commands lift, pushed full down against its stop. It was still full down. And the aircraft was at 3,500 feet, rising at 1,000 feet a minute. A helicopter with its collective bottomed does not climb. That is not a matter of opinion or of skill. It is what the control is. The lever was down, the machine was going up, and neither Coyne nor Jesse, both watching the instruments now, could make those 2 facts live together. Coyne looked again. The lever had not moved. He knew where his hand had left it, full down against the stop, where a pilot puts it when he wants the ground. 19 years of flying said the aircraft should be dropping out of the sky. The altimeter kept winding up. Coyne raised the collective, the input that should have made the climb worse, and the helicopter kept rising on its own terms through 3,600, 3,700, toward 3,800 feet. Then the crew felt a slight bump like a car crossing a seam in the pavement, and the aircraft was theirs again. The controls answered. The climb stopped. Coyne descended to 2,500 feet, pointed the nose at Cleveland, and flew. Off to the west, the object showed its white tail light for a while, then made a sharp turn toward the northwest, a turn the crew judged far too tight for anything with wings, and dropped below the horizon near Lake Erie and was gone. Below them, Ohio had noticed nothing. Porch lights burned in the farmyards, trucks moved along Route 30, the little town slept on. Whatever had just happened above Mansfield belonged for now to 4 men in a helicopter. The radios came back the way they had gone, without ceremony. Near Ashland, Coyne raised Akron approach control on the first try, got a position fix, and completed the flight. From first light on the horizon to an empty sky had been, by the best later reconstruction, about 5 minutes. The tightest part of it, the convergence, the beam, the climb, had taken less than 1. They landed at Cleveland Hopkins, shut the aircraft down, and did the thing that separates this case from 1,000 campfire stories. They reported it. That night, to the FAA station at the field, in writing to the Army on the standard form for a near mid-air collision, a form that had never been designed for the box Coyne now had to check, so the report went in under a heading improvised for the occasion: near mid-air collision with UFO. The morning after is where most stories like this one dissolve. This one instead turned into documents. Coyne and Yana Sek, before comparing notes, Each sketched what they had seen. Jesse remembered the drawings coming out alike. The Army's operational hazard report went up the chain with all 4 names on it, locating the aircraft southeast of Mansfield at 2,500 feet and describing an object converging at better than 600 knots. And Coyne went to see the head of FAA operations in Cleveland to ask the perfectly practical question of a pilot who has just been moved 1,800 feet against his will. Who investigates this? Vollmer's answer in substance was, nobody. There was no office for it. Project Blue Book, the Air Force's long clearinghouse for such reports, had been closed for 4 years. He did not doubt the crew. Asked about Coyne, he said he trusted his judgment without a question of a doubt. But there was simply no desk in the federal government where a report like this one was supposed to land. The most credentialed cockpit full of witnesses the field had seen in years, 4 signatures on official paper, and no one whose job it was to read it. What checking did get done mostly came back empty in both directions at once. When the FAA's tape from Mansfield was pulled, it was blank. Not even Coyne's first call, the one he heard acknowledged, was on it. Radar coverage in that corner of Ohio reached down only to about 3,500 feet, so the encounter had happened underneath the picture. No target was recorded of the object or of the descending helicopter. An FAA inspector examined the aircraft and found it undamaged and functioning normally. The one physical oddity anyone pointed to was the magnetic compass, which by crew accounts was never right afterward and was eventually replaced, though the maintenance records that would nail that down were never located. Nothing in that list proves the crew's account. Nothing in it touches the account either. The evening passed below the radar, off the tape, and outside every jurisdiction, and left behind exactly one durable trace, the report itself. The press found the story within days. The first article was written as it happened by a plain dealer reporter who shared the captain's surname and family, and the case began its long second life in newsprint. Coyne kept telling it the way he had told it the first night, without embroidery. For 3 years, the crew's account stood alone. Then, after a public appeal for witnesses in 1976, an investigator named Jenny Zeidman found the family on Route 430. On the night of the encounter, a mother had been driving 4 children home along that road, which runs east out of Mansfield past Charles Mill Reservoir, dark water, dark woods, the kind of stretch where headlights are the only lights. 2 of the children, Charles and Karen, gave the fullest account. They had noticed a bright light in the sky, red and green, coming down fast. Then a second set of lights flashing, lower, and with it a sound they knew from television and the highway, the flat chop of a helicopter. The car stopped. The children got out. What they described next, they described without knowing what 4 men in that helicopter had reported 3 years earlier. The larger object came over the smaller one and held there, just ahead of it and above it. A green light came on. And then came the phrase the children kept returning to, the one Zeidman wrote down more than once. Everything turned green. The road, the trees, the car, the helicopter beneath the object, all of it briefly the wrong color. Then the light was gone, and the bigger shape moved off, and the family drove home, and mostly did not talk about it. Testimony recovered 3 years late is worth less than testimony taken the same night. Zeidman said so herself, and it is only honest to say it here. Memories drift, and by 1976 the case had been in the papers. But the family's position on that road, at that hour, matched the helicopter's reconstructed track and so did the pairing of lights and the rotor noise, and the detail a coached witness would be least likely to supply, not a beam, not a spotlight, but the whole countryside changing color at once, matched the cockpit accounts almost word for word from half a mile below. The crew had described 5 minutes from the inside. Here, at last, was the outside of the 5 minutes, a wide shot of the small helicopter on its way home, and the long, dark shape standing over it above the reservoir, and the green light joining them together. A case this clean attracts serious critics, and the Coyne encounter drew the most dogged of them all. Philip Klass, the aviation journalist who made a career of taking UFO reports apart, proposed that the crew had seen a meteor, one of the bright fireballs that cross October skies, low and fast and gone. It was never a foolish idea, and fireballs have fooled pilots before. But a fireball is a matter of seconds, a streak, a flare, a fading trail. The object over Mansfield, by the reconstruction built from the crew's separate accounts, was in view for about 5 minutes, and in the closest part of those minutes it slowed down, stopped, and stood still in the air. Meteors do many things. Hovering is not one of them. Even Klass allowed that if the object stayed in view anywhere near that long, his explanation failed. Conventional aircraft have been suggested as well. None fit much better. No airplane carries that steady red, white, and green arrangement of lights. No airplane crosses miles of sky in seconds and then hangs quietly over a helicopter, and when the traffic that night was checked, there was nothing to find. The last fighter into Mansfield had landed a quarter hour before the encounter. Decades on in debates, the researcher Kevin Randall would map out. A subtler version was weighed, a large aircraft passing close overhead, stirring the air enough to lift the helicopter and fool its instruments. That one, at least, takes the climb seriously. It just requires an enormous airplane over Mansfield that nobody heard, nobody tracked, and nobody ever traced, mistaken at close range for a silent hovering shape by a crew chief who had spent a war around aircraft, while a family below watched the countryside turn green. Each explanation held up to the full account solves one piece by breaking 2 others. And this case had careful people on it for years. Zeidman, who had worked for Project Blue Book before any of this, gave the better part of a decade to the case, interviewing the crew separately and together, walking the timeline second by second, driving Route 430. Working alongside her was J. Allen Hynek, the astronomer who had been the Air Force's own house skeptic for 2 decades before the unexplained residue of his files wore his certainty away. The man who would spend the last years of his life, a decade after Mansfield, chasing a silent boomerang up and down the Hudson Valley. Hynek had personally explained away hundreds of red lights in the night sky. This one he kept. Zeidman's own conclusion, after all those years, ran to a single, unglamorous sentence. The object was real, and it was not any aircraft, meteor, or phenomenon she could identify. Not a spacecraft. She never said that. Just a thing that was there and that no paperwork could make into anything ordinary. The 4 men went back to their lives. Nobody sold a book. Nobody went on the lecture circuit. Healy went back to detective work, Janasek to his computers, Jesse to engineering. Coyne stayed in the Army Reserve and kept flying. In November of 1978, Lawrence Coyne put on his uniform and told the story one last time for the record at the United Nations before a committee weighing whether the world's governments should study such reports at all. He read it plainly, the way he had reported it the first night. The departure at 10:30, the clear sky, the red light, the lost radios, the green beam, the climb he did not command. He offered no theory of what the object was. He asked only that incidents like his be investigated, and he closed with the sentence he had earned over 5 years of telling. "I am convinced this object was real." Real is a modest word, and it may be the exactly right one. Somewhere over the dark farms east of Mansfield on an October night, something occupied 5 minutes of 4 careful men's lives and 1,800 feet of their altitude, and then gave them back. The evening left almost nothing behind: a blank tape, an empty radar picture, a compass that wandered, a form with an improvised title. The sky it happened in looks tonight the way it looked then: quiet, black, crossed now and again by the small moving lights of ordinary aircraft, each one exactly what it appears to be. Nearly every one of them always is. Coyne flew that route again many times in the years after. The country below stayed dark and kept its counsel: the reservoir, the woods, the road where a family once stood beside their car looking up. And if you were ever driving that road late past Charles Mill in the small hours, you might find yourself doing what the children did without deciding to, glancing up just once at the empty air above the water, half remembering a night when everything for a few seconds turned green.